Hello and welcome back. So last week was a bit of a weird one with only a few teams playing 4 times. This week it's even weirder, but for the opposite reason. American Thanksgiving this week, which means 2 things. 1, teams had better be in playoff position by now. And 2, the NHL schedule is all out of whack and nothing is normal. How can you navigate this week's schedule better than your opponents and take the week? So let's jump right in and find out. Now, we have an absolute insane schedule for week 7, something that we may not see again this year. 17 teams play 4 games next week, which is more than half the league. So you don't necessarily need to worry about your teams next week because a lot of them are going to be playing and getting a lot of volume. 3 teams only play twice, and that includes both Florida teams and the Detroit Red Wings. So if you own some of those guys, maybe you're going to need some waiver pickups, and that's what we're here for this week. But the main issue this week is American Thanksgiving. No games at all on Thursday, so you'll be sitting home getting fat and watching some football. And then there's only 2 games on Tuesday night. So usually in fantasy hockey and hockey in general, the light nights are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. But this week, the light night is Tuesday. So what you see on the bottom left there, these are the teams that usually would normally be a great schedule to own. They're all the light nights, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. But the reason you're seeing them here is because they do play 4 times and there's no back-to-backs. So these are some really good schedules. If you're looking for some waiver pickups from some of these teams, Ducks are available, Coyotes are available, Sharks are available, some Senators are available, and some middle 6 Winnipeg Jets are available as well. But yeah, these guys don't have any back-to-back games, which does help them because a lot of the other teams that play 4 times do have back-to-backs. You may also not want any Ducks because they're away at St. Louis on Monday. They host the Rangers Wednesday night and then hosting Ottawa Friday and Seattle Sunday, which should be a difficult matchup for them as well. And then on top of that, the Coyotes are on this massive 14-game road trip, and all of these games are away for Arizona. You're probably not going to want to target most of these guys anyway, but if you're in a league, a 14, 16 team league, and you need some power play options, the Coyotes guys are usually available for you, and they do have a nice 4-game week. But for the purpose of gaining an advantage from the schedule, let's take a look at who actually plays on Tuesday night and some potential waiver options from those teams. Now, just a reminder, if you want access to the interactive version of this schedule or any of the other visualizations I use on the channel, the Patreon link in the description is where you can find access to them there for just $3 a month, and you get advanced access to them as I usually make the dashboards before the videos, so you gain that slight informational advantage on your competition as well. But you have 4 player ads in most category leagues and most leagues, standard Yahoo leagues, and you'll probably want to use 2 of them on Tuesday and then maybe save 1 or 2 for the Sunday to see if you need to cap off the week and try to get back into it. Now, the games on Tuesday are Buffalo-Montreal, which nobody will be able to watch since it's on NHL Network. I'm still bitter about that. And then the Rangers are playing yet another 10:30 West Coast game for no reason. I guess the league just doesn't want anyone watching any games on Tuesday night. But that's okay because you don't need to watch the games to benefit from them in fantasy. So who can we lean on Tuesday night? Let's take a look at a couple of options. Now, the Sabres started the season hot. They've since cooled off, and they're on an 8-game losing streak. The best Sabres ad for Tuesday is probably going to be Jeff Skinner. So if you look back, Jeff Skinner against Montreal, 35 points in 36 career games. And what you see at the bottom is his performance against the Canadiens dating back to 2019. 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points, 26 shots in his last 7 games against the Habs. And that does include a 4-goal, 5-point night against them in February 2022, which does skew the numbers a little bit, but it also shows that he can have that one monster game against the right opponent. And Montreal does not have the best defense, so that could be the opponent for him to go off on. And he has been getting some shot volume this year. 2.82 shots per game is not the best he's ever done, but he's still relatively relevant in that category. And you can see against the Canadiens, he typically does get some pretty high shot volume. Only twice has he been below 3 shots per game in the last 7 meetings. So the best pickup might be Jeff Skinner. He's 34% owned. If you need a deeper play, Victor Olofsson is pretty much the opposite of ride the hot streak. So he's been pointless in his last 6 games. He's still shooting the puck, but what I showed you over the last couple of weeks in these weekly videos highlighting him is the guy doesn't score and then he goes off for a 2-goal game. And he's done that 3 or 4 times this year. And when you see him pointless for this long, it's just a matter of time until he breaks out and scores a couple goals. And it's likely that if he does score, that'll be also come on the power play because he's typically a power play goal specialist. I believe he has 9 goals on the year, so a lot of that comes in those 2-goal game bursts. And since he hasn't had any points in the last 6 games, no goals in the last 6 games, I would look for him to find the back of the net. If not Tuesday, they do have a pretty decent schedule this week, so you could potentially try to pick him up. But it is kind of like a hit or miss thing. He's not hot. You're just hoping for him to break out. And last but not least, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen getting his first start of the season on Saturday night against the Leafs. Not the easiest opponent to face for your first game of the year, and that resulted in a 5-2 loss. But if he does start on Tuesday, he will likely face a little bit of an easier opponent. If he doesn't start, Craig Anderson is only 13% owned, and he had a .933 save percentage in relief of Eric Comrie the other night in Ottawa. So either of those two Sabres goaltenders, and this is another one of those things, like we always like to look at hot streaks and try to continue to ride the hot hand, but you also have to look at the other end of the spectrum and see when guys are slumping, see when teams are slumping. They haven't won in 8 games, so they're very hungry for a win. So one of these two goaltenders is going to play, and I would imagine that they're going to, the team in front of them is going to play extra hard to try to get out of this losing streak. So you could potentially find yourself a goaltending win by looking at one of these two guys, and they're both relatively available on your waiver wire. If you want to go the opposite direction, in Montreal, some guys are getting elevated in the lineup and some guys are getting demoted. So Slavkovsky is currently on the 4th line. Dadonov and Anderson are on the 3rd line together with Sean Monahan, who I do have on this list. But the guy getting the best line assignment right now is Kirby Dach. Dach is playing with Suzuki and Caulfield on the top line and the top power play unit, and he's been really good in his last 10 games. 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points, 4 on the power play in his last 10 games, and his ownership has started to reflect that. You can see 44% ownership. It was not like that a couple of weeks ago, so people are starting to pay attention to Kirby Dach in this line assignment. But if he is available in your league, he's a center, right wing, dual eligible player, and he is getting a nice line assignment there. But deeper plays include Sean Monahan, who is centering that 3rd line, has 18 points in 17 career games against the Sabres, and he is seeing some time on the top power play unit along with Dach, Mike Hoffman, Suzuki, and Caulfield. So exposure to that unit is the main appeal for most of these guys, but after being dormant for most of the season, several of these guys are now starting to show faint signs of life. Hoffman is actually the most alive of the bunch with 4 goals and 5 points in his last 6 games, and almost 3 shots per game average over that span as well. So Mike Hoffman could be a nice little left wing, right wing option for you if because there might actually be better center options outside of Montreal. But if you're looking for exposure to this game, these 3 guys actually are all on the power play together, and they could provide some value for you. And then the other guy I'm looking at is Brendan Gallagher. He's playing a little bit better, currently playing on line 2 with Dvorak and Hoffman, but historically he's been a shot volume guy with a 3.29 shot per game 5-year average. He's well below that right now at 2.4, but he's been engaged in many of these games and just had a game against Columbus with a goal, an assist, a power play point, a couple of shots. Maybe he can start turning it around. And he had a goal, 5 shots, and a +2 against Buffalo earlier this season. So just something else to keep an eye on. Again, we don't want to just look at the guys who are hot. We need to look at the guys who are cold, who are ready to break out as well, and who are getting a decent line assignment. And one last note, I haven't been suggesting Montreal goaltending because of their team defense giving up a ton of high danger chances, but both Montembeault and Jake Allen have been playing well. Their goals above expected. Allen is 14th in the league right now with a 4.1 goals saved above expected, and Montembeault is 22nd with a 2.5 goals saved above expected. Allen is 38% owned, and Montembeault is more available at 11%. But whichever of them starts Tuesday, may help you in the goaltending department if you need to go there. The problem with this is, and the reason I didn't put them on the screen, your goalies are likely going to get enough starts this week if the majority of the league plays 4 times, so you may not need that desperation goalie ad on a Tuesday night. But if you do, these 2 guys are available, and as I mentioned before, Buffalo's on an 8-game losing streak, so if you want to play the averages and try to pick up a goalie on Montreal, that would suggest that maybe they have a better opportunity to take away the win. Now, in the other game on Tuesday night, Rangers-Kings, rematch of the 2014 Stanley Cup Final. Rangers ads are very different than what you would expect. They aren't scoring. They're still getting a ton of shots. They're just not converting. So guys like Kakko and Lafreniere may be on your wire, but the tricky part is that they're on a West Coast road trip and the kid line is back together, which means that they're playing third line minutes and some other guys are getting top 6 opportunities. So the top ad this week might be Barclay Goodrow, who's 3-position eligible, which is very handy for you if you're going to use him this week. Only 6% owned, got moved up to the Panarin line the last 2 games, has 5 points in the last 4 games. The kicker to this file is what you see on the left, each Rangers' career performance against the LA Kings. And while 5 points in 12 games isn't great, it is the 3rd highest on the team, and he is used to playing against them in that building as he did so for many years with San Jose. So you'll have to monitor his line assignment, make sure he's still there. But if he is there, he has some opportunities to score, and he does throw some hits as well. Now, you'll also notice on that list, Hedl has 3 points in 5 games against the Kings. He also has 2 goals, 3 assists in his last 6 games. So Hedl is more consistently engaged in the offense than Goodrow, which is why I featured him in the previous weekly video, and this is Goodrow's first appearance. But at 10% ownership, he's likely there for you, and he is dual position eligible. And even though they're getting third line minutes, I do like that kid line. They're getting a ton of chances. Kakko should have had a goal last night. Just, this is typical for what's happening right now. They're just not scoring. But another guy I want to bring to your attention, Sammy Blais, 16th in the league in hits, averaging 3.6 hits per game. And you'll recall he's coming back from a brutal knee injury suffered early last year. And on top of that, he was dealing with a small upper body injury earlier in the season. He looks healthier and a bit more confident now. I would expect a little bit more offense coming from Blais in the coming weeks, and you could get out ahead of that as he's only 1% owned right now. And if you're a Tanner Jeannot owner, and I am one of them, or you want Jeannot but he's unavailable, my main alternative would be Brandon Tanev, who is actually scoring right now, but he's not hitting as much. So if you want a guy who's hitting a bit more, Sammy Blais is averaging 3.66 hits per game, and he's starting to look a little bit more comfortable in that offense, and he could potentially be an option for you if you need one of these guys. All of these guys are relatively available for you, and then if you do want Kakko or Lafreniere, they're also relatively available as well. But the Rangers just aren't scoring. So let's take a look at LA. Now, in terms of LA ads, I highlighted the pickup of the night of this hat trick for Trevor Moore. That was on the Data Draft Instagram channel. I grabbed him. AC Delaware River went for Anze Kopitar that night, and my ad paid off handsomely. But the thing that makes Trevor Moore ownable is his shot volume floor. So 3.15 shots per game over the season means he's going to do something for you every game, which allows you to hold on to him and wait for a hot night. And Moore has 4 points in 5 games against the Rangers, including a goal and 3 assists, plus 3 and 12 shots. So he does like playing against the Rangers as well. So he could be a nice Tuesday ad if you're looking for it. If you still want line exposure but can't get more, try out Victor Arvidsson, who historically was the goal and shot volume guy, but's been racking up the assists lately. And we'll come back to that when we get into positional ads by category. No goals in his last 6 games, but 5 assists over that span. And every now and then he likes to pop off like he did against Florida on November 5th. A goal, an assist, a power play point, 7 shots, and a hit. But this line is very active. They're always in it in the offensive zone. And then Arvidsson has a goal and an assist, 10 shots in his last 3 games against the Rangers. So he's no stranger to playing the Rangers and likes to do that as well. Now the Kings have some awesome shots, hits, and blocks defensemen getting it done lately. So you see Mikey Anderson, 2% owned, Alex Edler, 1% owned, Sean Walker, 0% owned, each doing something a little bit different. So Anderson racking up the hits and blocks, Edler 3 assists, 3 shots, 7 hits, 7 blocks in the last week, and Sean Walker 2 assists, 8 shots, 2 hits and 9 blocks. So he isn't hitting as much, but getting some more production. It's kind of take your pick. Do you want hits and blocks, but no offensive production? Do you want a little bit of offensive production and some hits and blocks? Or do you want some more shot volume and blocks with a couple of points? It's really just take your pick of what you need, but all 3 of these defensemen are available. Typically, guys are going for Sean Durzi, Drew Doughty, they're owned up. So some of these guys are available for that Tuesday night matchup against New York. But these are some of the better options that you can pick up for that light night on Tuesday night if you want to maximize your starts this week. But let's take a look at just quickly the Sunday schedule. Now, I don't have a lot of plays for you yet because a lot will change between now and then. So if you haven't done so already, go and check out the Data Draft Instagram. I will likely be posting a couple of Sunday plays for you. There are a couple of games to look forward to, and there are some decent matchups. Winnipeg against Chicago, Minnesota against Arizona. Could be a goal fest in some of these games. Even the Kings and the Senators, that could be a goal fest. Kraken against the Ducks. The Kraken don't have a great offense, but the Ducks seem to make everybody look good. So these could be some interesting matchups. This Canucks Sharks game actually might be a close one, just given the state of both teams. So I didn't want to go ahead and give you any preemptive Sunday plays right now. So go ahead and check the Data Draft Instagram for some Sunday plays if you're looking for that later in the week. Now, we're not going to do what we normally do with goaltending just because of the amount of games going on this week. You'll be able to find something to grab off the wire to help you out. But let's start with the red-hot New Jersey Devils. And they're on a 12-game winning streak. I don't think anybody saw this coming. I've been on this team since the preseason, and I've been talking about them as being a bounce-back candidate. And I used the Devils' great defensive play and the metrics that I showed you to make the Blackwood pick in my draft. Unfortunately, I chose the wrong Devils goalie to hitch my wagon to. But now with Blackwood out, Akira Schmid is getting the odd start and playing behind a defense and a team that's won every game that he's played. And that's given him stellar numbers over his 3 starts, a 134 save percentage, 134 goals against, 941 save percentage in 3 starts. So you want exposure, especially to the Devils' goaltending. The defense is playing extremely well. Their offense is playing extremely well. Thomas Tatar is getting a top 6 look right now. Fabian Zetterlund is a guy that I've mentioned on the channel before. I actually mentioned him before he had this nice week, the last week or two. And he was getting a little bit of power play time. He had that overtime winner in Calgary. So some of these guys are available for you. You want to keep an eye on the hot teams like New Jersey. And if you watch them eye test, they're playing extremely well. It's not a myth or a facade or fugazi, as Biz Nasty likes to talk about. But yeah, the guys that you want to target are the guys on the better defensive teams who are having more success that way. So Akira Schmid is number 1 at the top of that list. These stats are all from the last 2 weeks, so we're kind of showing what's been going on recently. And recently, Pavel Francouz has been playing really well. So if you were waiting on him to heat up, he has rewarded you for your patience. The last 2 weeks, he's been getting called upon. He's gotten 2 wins, 2 games, 2 starts and 2 wins. 148 goals against and a 959 save percentage, which is nuts. I'll be the first to admit I thought Francouz was potentially going to take the net from Georgiev. Georgiev's been stellar, looking like a number 1. So it looks like their analytics paid off, and they were picking the right goaltender to try to lead them through this time period. But if you do have Francouz, he is 33% owned, which is pretty high for a backup. But I guess that's why, because you're getting exposure to Colorado. So if he's available on your wire and if you see him getting that spot start, he's a no-brainer. And then I was talking about the Minnesota Wild team defense and suggesting a couple of weeks ago that you shouldn't panic with Marc-Andre Fleury. In fact, he could have been at the time a good buy low candidate. But his backup, Philip Gustafson, who at the time wasn't winning anything, he starts to make a few adjustments, and now it seems like he's made those 2 wins in 4 games, but a nice 220 goals against and a 926 save percentage. They got a really nice win against Carolina in OT last night. They're starting to find their game as well. But when you're making decisions about goalies, it's always important to factor in the strength of the team defense playing in front of the goalie, how many high danger chances they give up, and that gives you a better chance for a higher win probability for that goaltender and better stats overall. And with that said, I'd take a lesser goalie on a good defensive team over a great goalie on a bad team, and that brings me to John Gibson. So if you have John Gibson, you should absolutely drop him. You shouldn't have kept him this long. He's just not worth it. Anaheim is bleeding goals left and right. They got pounded again last night. I believe it was 6-2 against St. Louis. So, these are the guys that you would pick up if you do drop John Gibson. I know Gibson gets the starts. He's just not getting anything else. So you're not getting any value out of those starts. Now, I haven't looked at rookies in quite a while, but they're not always the best fantasy options, but especially in places like Arizona and Columbus, especially Columbus, which is ravaged by injuries, rookies are getting some responsibility, and a couple of them have been performing pretty well. So Matias Maccelli, we've talked about him a couple of times on the channel. In Arizona, he's getting some PP2 time, making some plays, very assist heavy, but the highest point totals from a rookie thus far, 10 points in 16 games. It's a little bit cut off. But yeah, you can see most of these guys. Matty Beniers, most people understand that he's going to be at the top of this list. He's cooled off a little bit, but last year he was on almost a point per game pace when he came up. This year, 9 points in 17 games, but still getting a bunch of opportunities. He hit the post a couple times against the Rangers the other night. Still looks like he's entrenched in that top 6. But a guy getting a massively elevated role right now is Jake Sanderson, who stepped in for Thomas Chabot, who is out with an injury. And in that time, his ice time has elevated from around 18 to 19 minutes a night to now 24 to 25 minutes a night, and he's also quarterbacking the power play, which gives you good exposure there. And he's climbed to the top of these rankings, 9 assists, so it's all assist heavy, but 9 points in 17 games for a defenseman is very good. Owen Power is another defenseman who's climbing up the rankings as well. I saw him paired with Rasmus Dahlin a little bit last night. So he's getting a little bit of an elevated role, starting to find his footing in the NHL as well. And then if you look at Shane Pinto, after getting red hot in the goal department, he's cooled off a bit, which we were expecting. If you watched the early season player trends video, his shooting percentage at that time was 40%, which was obviously unsustainable. It's down to 23.4%, which is a bit more reasonable. But he's only getting goals, only 1 assist on the season, so you'll get goals or nothing with some of those guys. Now, the guy I'm most interested in at this point is Kent Johnson, 8 points in 13 games, one of the highest point per game averages amongst rookies, and his ice time is around 12 minutes a night, but he's currently on the third line, and he's getting some PP1 time with all those injuries, and he has the skill to capitalize on that. So Johnson is only 6% owned, so he's probably available in your league. Columbus only plays 3 times this week, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, so maybe a midweek stream option. But something to monitor going forward because he does have a ton of skill, and his raw numbers are good for 5th. But if you look at a per game basis, he's closer to the top. Maccelli would be up there, but also a guy I factored in on the Data Draft Instagram account, Juuso Parssinen. He's playing in Nashville's top 6. He's on PP1 in Nashville. He's got a high point per game average just because he hasn't played a ton of games. But Kent Johnson's also getting it done, and you might want to keep an eye on that. And then, as I mentioned before, Zetterlund, same type of thing, 8 points in 13 games, and he's getting top 6 exposure in New Jersey, which is something that you definitely want as well. Now, as we turn to ads by category, the goal leaders, several of them I've featured on the Data Draft Instagram, and they've continued this hot week, including Trevor Moore, Sean Corrali, Logan Couture, and Boone Jenner, all of which were featured on the Instagram. Of these players highlighted who may be available on your wire, who are most likely to keep this up? So my top target is David Krejci, only 17% owned. As you can see here, 3 goals last week, 1 power play point, a couple of shots. He's not getting a ton of peripherals, but he is still in that top 6, and he's getting PP1 exposure in Boston. Boston's still a wagon right now, so that's a guy who I believe could potentially keep this production up, as opposed to a guy like Sean Corrali, who's probably just having a really, really good week. Logan Couture at 32% owned seems more able to stay at that pace than a guy like Corrali or Hronek or somebody like that. But if you look a little bit further down, a player I've mentioned in almost every weekly video thus far, and that is Nino Niederreiter. A 3-goal week, still getting second line and top power play exposure in Nashville. And Nashville's starting to find their game as well. Could be a nice target in a 4-game week. He is a single position left winger, but only 23% owned. And again, I've featured him every single week in these videos, and he's still relevant. So He's not, flying off the charts and people are grabbing him up left and right. So he could potentially still give you some value at only 23% owned. Now, in terms of Ruzicka, I do believe that this is more line dependent, and I don't know why they list him as a center because last I checked he was playing top line left wing, but only 3% owned. If you're picking him up now, you're just hoping to ride this hot streak and ride that line assignment. 3 goals, 2 assists, 1 on the power play, a couple shots and hits as well, but I do think he is line dependent. If he loses that line assignment, he loses a lot of his fantasy value. But another guy that you might want to pay attention to, and he'll show up in a couple of these, is Owen Tippett. He may actually be ownable either way, mainly due to his shot volume. So averaging 2.92 shots per game, 6 goals, 10 points in 13 games thus far, and he seems to be exactly what John Tortorella wants, getting a few hits and blocks in there as well. But the 15 shots, 3 goals, 2 assists, 1 power play point, excellent week for Owen Tippett, dual position winger, so that could help you with positional flexibility as well. And then I just quickly wanted to shout out Carter Verhaeghe. 4 goals in his last 5 games, 11 on the year, and that's going into play today, which is Sunday. He's on fire right now, and if you're in a shallow league, you're looking for wingers, he should be at the top of your list. And then also, if you stuck with Lehkonen and or Buchnevich, they're both showing up on this list as well. Buchnevich, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in a 4-game week, 2 power play points, 10 shots. So a very good week for Pavel Buchnevich, and he hit the waiver wire in my league. I would have picked him up, but I just didn't have the room at the time. Arturi Lehkonen, people were asking about him. Should you keep him? And yes, the answer is as long as Gabe Landeskog is out, and as long as they have a spot for him on that top power play, you should continue to ride this hot streak. 3 goals, 1 assist, 2 power play points over the past week. So a lot of good things happening in the goal department. Let's turn it over to shots because a lot of this kind of mirrors the same things that we've been talking about. Owen Tippett shows up on this list. Just talked about him. Nobody's caught on yet. He's only 5% owned, so I would expect that ownership to rise this week. Maybe get out ahead of it if you need some shot volume for your category leagues or even points leagues with heavy shot weighting. Trevor Moore, he factored into the goals ads, and I mentioned him on Instagram as well, but his main party piece is his shot volume, which hasn't dipped through 7 weeks, which gives him a nice floor as you wait for him to get hot like he did this week. And then Mason Marchment, a couple of you messaged me about him asking, is he good? Is he, falling off a cliff? Like, what's going on with Mason Marchment? It appears he's back after a couple of lighter weeks. So 2 goals, 2 assists, 14 shots, and his shot volume is the main reason to hold on to him. I would have expected hits, but he's not hitting as much as you would expect. Only 3 hits, but 14 shots. So he's making the most of his opportunity in Dallas. He's dual position eligible, so that helps you as well. Looking down a little bit, Garnet Hathaway is definitely a hits guy. But if you're looking for a hits forward, you might as well grab a guy who gets something else as well, not just hits. And that's what Hathaway's been doing lately. Also chipped in a goal. I wouldn't bank on that to continue, but you're getting him for the hits, and the shots are gravy at this point. 14 hits, 13 shots. You could do a lot worse than that. Other than that, most of these shot leaders are owned up. Maybe Jordan Kyrou or Braden Shen are there for you down at the bottom here. They're a little bit cut off, Shen is at least, but Kyrou 66% owned, Shen 69% owned. Kyrou, an excellent week. 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points, 12 shots. And then much like Nashville, St. Louis has found their game. So now may be the best and last time to buy low on some of these St. Louis Blues. Now, before we talk about power play, I've been saying for a week or two that it's only a matter of time before Matt Barzal scores a goal. And sure enough, he picked up 2 last night. A nice week with 3 assists, 4 power play points, 8 shots. And he's only 64% owned despite being over a point per game right now. On the year, he has 21 points in 19 games, and his shooting percentage is still 4%. So there is room for more goal production out of Matt Barzal. We've only started to see the tip of the iceberg in terms of his goal production. So if you need a center, especially assist-heavy center, but I would expect some goals to start going in for him. Now, below him, you see a couple of Ducks. Adam Henrique getting an opportunity on the top PP. Cam Fowler finally woke up this week. 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, chipping in on the power play as well. You can't touch Ducks goaltending, but their offense still has a few guys that can get you some points, and these two plus Terry and Zegras, guys like that, can help you in a 4-game week this week where they have no back-to-backs. So maybe keep an eye on Cam Fowler if you need a defenseman. I don't know how long Henrique can keep this up, but he is dual position eligible, and he has games Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, so he will be available for you, especially for that Sunday matchup, which could be a goal fest because most games against Anaheim are. But another guy I wanted to feature, Brock Besser. He was featured last week for the assist he was racking up. This week, he's on the power play list, and he's even chipped in a couple goals. So 2 goals, 2 assists, 3 power play points, 8 shots. He's finding his game, and if he was dual position eligible, I would have scooped him up by now. But I'm heavy on right wingers, so I need more of a left wing option. But if you need right wingers, you could do worse. 11 points in 12 games on the year, 4 power play points, and his shooting percentage is 6.7%. So he does have more room to add in some goal production going forward. And Vancouver has a 4-game week this week as well. Now, I've been eyeing up Alex Tuch as well. Same problem, though, strict right winger, but his production has been good. 5 points, 2 goals, 3 assists, 2 power play points, 8 shots in just 3 games last week. The Sabres have been struggling, and they just lost their 8th in a row, but that doesn't mean that they aren't scoring and can give you some fantasy value. I mentioned them earlier. They're playing on that light Tuesday night, so maybe if you need a right winger for that Tuesday night game, Alex Tuch, 67%, he may or may not be there for you. In terms of some of these guys down the list a little bit, Kurashev, I wouldn't necessarily expect that to continue. Could just be a weak anomaly. But I did want to mention Juuso Parssinen. I mentioned him in the Instagram. 3 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 2 power play points. He's getting top 6 minutes and top power play line exposure. So not a lot of sample size this year, but he's only 4% owned. And he may be getting that line assignment for the rest of the week, and they do have 4 games this week, so it could be a nice little short-term play as we wait for a little bit more to start happening in Nashville. Some of their top guys haven't been getting going as of late, which is why Parsonen's getting that opportunity. But he could be there for you as well in pretty much every league, 4% owned, and you're basically riding the hot streak there. Now, as we turn to assists, Arvidsson is usually a shot volume guy, and this year he's definitely a setup guy, but that line is still churning out points, and you definitely want access to them. If you need wingers, Trevor Moore you saw on the goals and shots list. Here you see his line mate Arvidsson. If you need a center, it's Phil Deneau. But 5 assists for Arvidsson, 1 on the power play, only 26% owned. We touched on Cam Fowler. He's a guy that if you're experiencing injuries on defense, you could try to grab him because he's the Ducks' top defenseman, and he will get power play time, as we saw in the power play production in the last slide. He does get some shots, hits, and blocks as well, depending on the matchups. He was unownable until this week, though. He had almost no points all season long. Got most of his point totals this past week. So if he finally woke up, it could be a nice buy low on a defenseman that's usually a little bit more fantasy relevant than he's been. Now, one of the best ads, unfortunately, I went with Brandon Hagel, but the best ad might be Alex Killorn from Tampa Bay. So dual position, left wing, right wing eligible. 2 goals, 4 assists, 10 shots. He's been getting some chances. He tied the game last night in Nashville, which helped them get the win. So if you have Vasilevsky, you can thank Alex Killorn for that. He's only 23% owned right now, getting you second line exposure with Stamkos and Nick Paul. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. He's 23% owned, and playing with those caliber of players, he's typically always available on the waiver wire because of this. He's not a guy that consistently puts up production, but when he's hot, you might as well ride the hot streak, and he's hot right now. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, Jamie Benn is kicking ass in fantasy right now, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But his longtime teammate Tyler Seguin, usually a shot volume guy, now starting to rack up some assists. A goal, 4 assists last week, 6 shots. The shot totals are a little low for what you would normally expect from Seguin, but 15 points in 18 games on the year, just not the same shot volume that we're used to with him. But he is a dual center right wing eligible player, which is relatively rare in fantasy. So if you need that, maybe try to target him. He's 59% owned, so not a lot there. Robert Thomas, we mentioned some of the other Blues were starting to get it done. Kyrou, Buchnevich. But Robert Thomas also getting some assists, 2 goals, 4 assists, 2 power play points, 10 shots. So a nice week for Robert Thomas and the St. Louis Blues. And then David Perron. The number one reason to grab Perron would be his line exposure for the power play. With Kubalik, Larkin, Mo Seider, they're all very good at the seam pass. And that typically you'll see when Perron gets assists, a lot of them come on the power play. This week, one of them came on the power play. But a nice week, 5 points in 3 games for Perron. He's usually fantasy relevant. He had some time last year where he wasn't, but this year he is fantasy relevant again. And again, that power play exposure is something that you want access to if you're looking for a right winger. That's the only problem. He's only single position eligible. Now, in terms of hits, guess who's back? So after getting more minutes than he knew what to do with during the Ekblad injury situation, my boy Radko Gudas is back atop the hits leaderboard for the week. And this is a lesson in using ice time to make some decisions for your fantasy team. So when Ekblad went down, Gudas went from 16 to 18 minutes a night to 24 minutes a night, and he didn't know how to handle those minutes. And his hitting went down as a result. So now that Ekblad is back, his minutes are down. He's slotted where he should be on the depth chart. And like magic, the hits come back. So always take ice time into consideration when you're deciding between waiver ads, because that can dictate whether the player is going to do what you're picking them up to do. If they're playing outside of their normal comfort zone, then they might not be able to do that. If they're not playing enough minutes, like Arthur Kaliev, people were, other fantasy pages were recommending Arthur Kaliev, but I'm looking at his ice time and it's only 12 minutes a night, so it didn't seem like it was worth the pickup, and thus far it hasn't been. But in terms of hitters this week, so many teams play 4 times. You'll probably be able to find a hitter for your league somewhere, but I do like to make sure that my hitters do something else as well. And with Jeannot, it used to be hits and goals. I covered some replacement options before, but he just isn't getting the goal production yet. I'll stick with him just because he's a hitting machine. But a guy to look at here is Ian Cole. It's cut off a little bit, but 12 hits and 12 blocks last week in 4 games with Tampa. That's going to add some value to your team more than a guy who's up here at 13 or 14 hits but with no blocks. So you want to try to make sure that your hits guy is doing something else, whether it's plus minus if you're in a plus minus league, shot volume. If you look at Hathaway, he had the hits and the shot volume. You want something else from your hits guy. You don't want them just getting hits. If you just need hits, a guy for a game or two to try, put you over the top, you can obviously go to the top of this list. Ferravari's there every week. Hathaway's up there all the time. Marcus Foligno, an excellent hitting week, 20 hits in 4 games. Gudas did 17 hits in 3 games, so that's a little bit more valuable just on a per game basis. But a lot of these guys are going to be available for you this week, and you're going to get an opportunity with a 4-game week from most of your guys. Now, this week in my league, THHL saw me absolutely dominate the newcomer Queens Peens, and this is what happens when you address your team needs with a trade. So a lot of time, I talked in the trading video, you have to make sure that you're trading with a purpose, and my purpose was to fix my goaltending. I used to have trouble getting a win. I used to have trouble getting above 900 save percentage, but with the Binnington waiver ad and the Saros trade that I made, and with Matt Murray coming back off of IR, I had maybe the best goaltending week I've ever had, though I chose to sit all 4 of my goalies last night, and they all had an excellent game, including a shutout from Tristan Jarry. So I could have had 8 wins and a shutout and gone 10-0 on the week, but it was better risk management to sit my goalies and not lose the goals against and save percentage lead that I had. But speaking of Matt Murray, I now have 4 goalies, and I don't need that many. So I've made a trade with Lake Mohawk Moose for Patrick Kane, and it seemed like a nice buy low opportunity for Kane, while the Moose, who drafted Shesterkin 7th overall and picked up Carter Hart, they're now desperate for goaltending wins. So Matt Murray kind of solves that issue there, but he had to pay a premium to get those goaltending wins from Matt Murray. And this is another case where I've taken a 10 to 12th round pick in Matt Murray and parlayed that into a 4th round Patrick Kane. And he's usually a 1st or 2nd round type of player. So this is kind of the value proposition. You want to take guys who are playing hot right now, guys that you don't necessarily need, and then try to trade them up for a guy who's not playing well but should be, and buy low on that opportunity. That's kind of the value proposition that we're working with for this trade and for the previous trade that I made. And overall, though, it looks like I'll go 2-2 this week in my leagues, and that's a result of a light week for Connor McDavid. If he played more than 2 games, I might have been able to edge out another win or two, but that does put me at 20-4 through the first 6 weeks of the season across 4 leagues with different formats, category leagues, point leagues, face-off leagues, etc. So just showing you what is possible if you use the data draft strategy and stay up to date with all the latest trends and hot streaks. If you're not already, go ahead and follow Data Draft on Instagram for more updates. If I'm not able to get a video out on YouTube, usually I do post on Instagram, so you can keep yourself plugged in that way. But if you made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you again. Leave a like, a comment, subscribe. I'm still trying to grow this channel, and any little bit helps. And I appreciate all your viewership as well. But thank you again, and I will see you in the next one.